Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So how concerned are you about Israel spying on the United States and freelancing in Lebanon?
Well, look, I think obviously the Israelis and the Israelis and the United States, we have a lot of shared interests, but we also have some situations where our interests diverge. And I think where the president has been very clear here is that while Israel obviously has some objectives that it has, the United States' main objective in Iran is to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. And we've actually, thanks to what's happened over the last few months, but really over the last year and a half, we've created the space necessary where the president believes, and I think that he's right, that we can get the long-term settlement to Iran's nuclear deal. Now, Israel may like that, they may not like that, but fundamentally, we think this is in the best interest of the United States of America. So we're going to keep on pursuing it because that's what the President of the United States was elected to do. That's what we have to do in order to properly serve the American people.
Do you think the Iranians are trying to play us at the negotiating table?
Well, I think, Jesse, everybody's always trying to play everybody. I think the president's attitude on this is we have to verify, of course. One of the most important things to whether this ultimate settlement is a success is not what the Iranians write on the paper, but whether they actually comply with some of the requirements of the settlement that we come up to. I think it's very important, and this is one of the big differences. You always hear people talk about the Obama deal and what went wrong with it. The number one thing that went wrong with the Obama deal, Jesse, is that there was not a proper inspections regime to ensure that the Iranians could never build a nuclear weapon. And that's one of the big differences between what happened then and what the President of the United States would get to, assuming we're ultimately able to make a deal. So I don't assume that anybody's acting in good faith. Obviously, we've been very involved in these negotiations, Jesse. We're going to take the attitude of accomplish the president's mission, but verify over the long term that the Iranians are keeping their end of the bargain. It's a tall order, but it's one that the president has put us in a good position to achieve because let's be honest, Jesse, the Iranians don't want this war to continue. It's not in their best interest. And I think they're coming to the table, putting some real things on the table. We're, of course, going to verify it. But if we get to this deal, it's going to be a home run win for the American people.
I hope so. Let's go to California. Not sure how closely you've been following this. They are still counting the votes. Do you trust this election?
Fundamentally, the problem here with this whole thing is how is it that you had, Karen Bass was in first place, Spencer Pratt was in second place, and then this other woman was in third place. You would expect these mail-in ballots to kind of meet that same basic pattern where, number one would get the most votes, number two would get the second most votes, and so on. But somehow we find ourselves in a situation where, number one, they're still receiving ballots, not just counting ballots, Jesse. They're still receiving ballots. And number two, the way that they're coming in just so happens to work out such that the Republican is getting kicked out of the final two. So it's a Democrat versus Democrat runoff. That seems pretty shady to me, especially when you add on top of the fact that in California, you are prohibited from asking for somebody's identification before they vote.
We just found out through the U.S. attorney there that you can register to vote with a gym membership card. How ridiculous is that?
Well, and of course, we know that Gold's Gym would probably hand out a gym membership to anybody who's willing to pay, including, for example, an illegal alien. And we joke about this, Jesse, but that's why these elections don't have the legitimacy they need, is because if you're going to give a card to anybody who's willing to pay $10 a month for a gym membership, then you're not actually going to ensure that that person is legitimately able to vote. This is why we have, for example, photo ID to get on an airplane so that airplane rides are safe. This is why we have photo ID to purchase alcohol to ensure that you're the proper age. It's insane that we have a state not only that doesn't ask for your identification, but will throw you in jail if you're an elections official who is asking for identification.
So you're the fraud czar now. House Oversight just came out with a report that said that Tim Walz was warned repeatedly that there was fraud, and he kept the money flowing because he didn't want to be called racist. That sounds like a crime to me. Is that a crime?
Well, I'm going to let the law determine what's a crime and what's not. We're certainly going to investigate this, Jesse, and I guess now I can make a bit of breaking news because I left the White House to come here to do this interview with you. And before I did, we actually referred this particular case to the Department of Justice for a full criminal investigation. We are not going to do what the Biden administration did and make judgments of the law before all the facts are in. But here's what's particularly troubling about this to me is Jesse, you had people within Governor Walz's office who were saying, you know what, this looks like fraud. It looks like these Somalian illegal immigrants are doing something that's very shady. And then you had people who shut them down, who shut these whistleblowers down and said, you know, you're a racist or you're a xenophobe for asking questions about where taxpayer money is going. What that means to me, Jesse, is that clearly people weren't taking fraud seriously. Whether it rises to the level of a criminal violation, we're going to investigate it. And of course, if it does rise to that level, we're going to prosecute it. We have to.
Yeah, it's so offensive because some of these guys are riding around in Bentleys and Maseratis, and the American taxpayer, you got to take it from me, they are livid about this kind of stuff. The midterm elections, right around the corner. The Democrats have nominated Tallarico and Plattner to win back men, Mr. Vice President. Is that going to work?
I'm probably the worst person to ask how the Democrats can win votes, Jesse. But look, my free political advice to Democrats is very simple. It's just nominate normal human beings. Don't run on men playing in women's sports. Don't run on letting illegal immigrants flood our country. And don't run on letting fraudsters in Minnesota take advantage of the American taxpayer. And you guys would do a lot better. I don't know why Democrats can't just find normal, well-adjusted candidates, whether men or women. I think they would do a lot better. But I'm not complaining, Jesse, because I think it puts our party, my party, in a much better position to perform in the midterms. As you know, Jesse, midterms are always very tough for the party in power. If you go back historically, even when the country's been doing very well, midterms are pretty bad for the country or for the party that's in power. But I think we have a great chance. Number one, because the president has delivered on so many of his core campaign promises. But number two, it's because the Democrats can't seem to nominate normal people to ask for the American people's vote.
Maybe normal people don't want to run as Democrats. That's the key. I want to put this on the record, though, Mr. Vice President. Do you have any concerning tattoos that we don't know about?
Jesse, if I had any concerning tattoos, I think the mainstream media would have talked about it ad nauseum 2 years ago. I actually have no tattoos, Jesse, for one simple reason. I was going to get a tattoo before I showed up to Marine Corps boot camp of the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, the famous Marine Corps emblem. And I had a recruiter who told me that if I showed up to boot camp with a Marine tattoo, I would get absolutely eviscerated by the drill instructors. So I didn't get the tattoo then or ever. I am tattooless.
Okay, good. For your own safety, that was probably good. Mr. Vice President, we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.